Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here are your hosts, Drew Freeman and Alex Sullivan.
Thanks, Ray. This is the Ray Wenderlich podcast. Welcome to episode 7 for season 10. This episode was recorded on Cinco de Mayo, Tuesday, the 5th of May, for release on the 20th of 2020. This episode is sponsored by a black pen on Drew's desk and nobody else in particular. I am Alex Sullivan, here with my recently semi-centennial co-host, Drew Freeman.
Thanks, Alex. That's right. This is my 50th episode of the Ray Wenderlich podcast. Our guest for this episode is Andy Pereira. Andy is a senior iOS developer in the Atlanta area who has been a contributing author for RayWenderlich.com for nearly a decade.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
On this episode, Andy will flip Apple's magic catalyst switch to show how to get iOS apps running on the Mac. That's right, kids. It's not just an iOS show, it's an iOS and Mac show. Afterwards, Drew will talk about the differences between being an engineer and being an architect. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So, I guess the big question that we're asking many people for this part of the season is, are you staying sheltered and staying healthy?
Yeah, we are. Being here in Georgia, our government wants us to go out a little bit sooner, but we're here in town. It seems like everybody's still trying to stay safe, stay indoors, and limit their exposure as much as they can. So things have been interesting here, but good.
Because now I've read that you're also a bit of a world traveler, so this has got to be a little bit of a pain.
It is. Me and my wife, we have a goal. We've been married for 11 years now, and
Congrats.
We're still in our, I guess, my mid-30s. Before we turn 40, we want to be able to hit 40 visited countries.
Oh, that's awesome.
So this put a little bit of a problem in the plans there, but I think we can make it through.
So what's the most interesting country you've been to so far?
Surprisingly, we stopped off in Bratislava, Slovakia. Didn't know what to expect, and it honestly ended up being one of, I think, our just favorite surprise countries that we've been to.
Oh, that's awesome.
What made it so interesting?
Well, honestly, not to sound too ignorant American, we just didn't know much about it. Being that former communist country, there wasn't a lot of information that we heard growing up. And we got there, it was beautiful. The people were amazingly friendly. It was what we expect going to most any European country, but we knew nothing about it. We just were driving through and stopped for a day and a half there and absolutely loved it.
Oh, that sounds really nice.
So it's the sort of situation where since you had no expectations because you hadn't really filtered any of the information, you ended up being blown away.
Yeah, and I would say even after having been, I would tell anybody to go. We made it through Austria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, and the whole trip was amazing. But to have no expectations, just be surprised, I'd still say it's worth going back and seeing it for yourself. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I will spare you the question of what was the worst country, because it's not fair to that country.
Well, I don't think there has been one. We've had bad experiences.
Diplomatic.
Yeah.
Good answer.
They've all been good.
Now, as for the other question I typically will ask is what you do in your spare time when you're not doing code. And for those who are watching this on YouTube with the full episode, you probably can see over Andy's shoulder is a bunch of guitars and an amp.
Yeah, so I've been playing guitar for nearly 20 years. I've played piano since I was 6 years old. So it's just been, music is a big part of my life. Recently I was able to finally get, a couple of these guitars that I've wanted for a long time, but that's helped this quarantine go by much easier for me.
That's awesome.
Do you have a specific style you like to play most?
I'm usually, if I'm playing acoustic, it'll be something like, contemporary folk. But if I'm playing electric, I'm really into playing blues, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix type stuff. That's where, I like just turning up the Fender amp and trying to get those types of tones through it.
So the obvious question now is Eric Clapton God?
One of them. If there's a trinity, he could be one of them. Yeah.
Somewhere I've got to find a copy of that picture for the show notes. That Clapton is God picture that has a dog taking a leak on it, which Clapton's always said sort of gives you the macro and the micro of this entire picture.
I would endorse the statement. Yeah, for sure.
I like that. I would endorse that.
Now you've been writing for Ray now for close to 10 years.
I have. It was I think it was dumb luck. I was a pretty junior developer at the time, and I had, of course, been reading the website to try and bone up my chops and become a better developer. And I saw one day somebody wrote a Mac OS, at the time OS 10 tutorial. Mm-hmm. I had written a couple of OS 10 apps for work, and I thought, hey, this is a great chance. Maybe I could reach out and jump in. I did my first tutorial about Cocoa bindings and core data, and Ray, he was gracious and just said, yeah, that sounds good. And I've been writing for the website ever since.
And now you've done you did the Catalyst by tutorials. You've done other books, if I'm right.
I wrote a couple of chapters for the iOS 11 by tutorials. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty busy when it comes to just my personal life, so it's been mainly the website articles. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was writing Catalyst for tutorials with the new technology having just dropped on everybody's lap?
We were kind of expecting it for about a year, so I at least was prepped mentally. I had signed up to write for the book the year before it came out, and when it finally landed, there was a lot of nerves. It was a lot of for having to write the book, but it was very exciting to be a part of, and a big challenge to get through what was actually available and how to work with it.
So let's do it. Let's take the 20,000-foot view of Catalyst. How do we explain what Catalyst is? Is it really just a switch?
Yeah, that's a hard answer. It's you'll see on Apple's website, you'll see in the book, the first thing you do is you turn on a switch, and if you don't have really any crazy code, your app will just run on the Mac.
Ooh.
But that's a whole different story. Is if you want it to look good, if you want it to behave like a Mac app would.
Mine didn't.
Sounds like you had some crazy code.
You had some crazy code.
No, actually, we'll get to it later on. I had Flutter. Not Flutter, Flurry.
Okay.
Let's say Flutter should help with that endeavor.
No. I had Flurry, and Flurry is an analytics plugin, but unfortunately, the way that Flurry is written, it's got the simulator code as well as the compiled code, so that caused problems.
Yes, that will for sure,
and we'll explain why shortly. So we flip the switch, and we have. If it's not really crazy code. I'm assuming by crazy code, you mean a couple of the frameworks just really you don't want to go there?
In what we were doing, we didn't run into much. I maybe use that term a little more in line with Apple kind of gives you this ability to write a good-looking stock app. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us want to be able to write custom shapes, designs, colors. And when you put that all together, you could maybe make a great Mac OS app, make a great iOS or iPad OS app. Sometimes those don't translate so well. Or perhaps you do have a situation like you did with Flurry or a third-party library that just isn't going to support because of the way maybe the binary is built for it.
Mm-hmm. So what can you give me a rough idea of what's going on behind the scenes, at least as far as the third-party world of people outside Apple understand it?
Apple has exposed pieces of UIKit on Mac OS and also exposed things that maybe were only available in Mac OS for you to use on iPad OS and be able to compile without any worry about having to write code like if it's AppKit or if it's UIKit.
Okay. But then again, hardware-specific things are probably going to fail right off the bat if you're leveraging, say, the back camera or leveraging the compass, etc.
Yeah, so there are little bits and pieces that if you're using anything hardware specific, you will run into that are easily you can easily have you have an easy workaround to just say if it's this target OS that you want to work with, do this. Yeah. So those macros come in a little bit different than they used to.
So it's really getting to the point where you can have one code repository, and with a couple of macros here and a couple of macros there, you have your iPhone app, your iPad app, your Mac app, and in some cases, you can also have your extension for your watch or TV apps all in one code base. Yeah,
absolutely. One of the things that we did with the book Catalyst by Tutorials is we said, why don't we just take an iPad app, one that is just fully written, and show users how to do iPad OS things that will just, when you turn that switch on, work for Mac OS. Mm-hmm. We, of course, had to do specific things that were, here's how you need to do, maybe a specific thing just for Mac OS. But the goal was start just a great iOS app and be able to do whatever you need there and turn it on.
Okay.
Interesting.
Now, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I've done some iOS development, but I've never written a Mac OS app. So I don't have a good sense of do you use UI table views in Mac OS, or is it a different construct? Or
no, actually, so you would have things like you probably recognize how it's NS table view or NS split view. There is an app kit equivalent of most of those things, and there are plenty of other things that are available in Mac OS in app kit that aren't available, don't have an equivalency in iPad OS. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so is it just translating your UI scroll view to an NS scroll view under the hood?
Actually, no, it's quite the opposite. You're going to just have a UI scroll view or a UI table view, UI split view controller, and those things are now available in Mac OS. And Apple's done the work of translating what that UI is supposed to look like for you natively on Mac OS.
One of the things that you pointed out was that you took an iPad app and you're specifically aiming more toward iPad than iPhone. And the reason I stopped here is because you mentioned the split view controller, which is one of the big separating differences that you find between the iPhone world and the iPad world is that you get that targeting system where you actually have the list and it's targeted in the same place. Is that one of the split view controllers? Is that one of the primary reasons that iPad tends to work a lot better than iPhone for the Catalyst project?
So I think deep down, to a developer, you're probably not ever really running into anything where you say, oh, this is iPad OS specific only. It's more, I think, the mindset, the mentality, more than anything. I know that deep down under the hood, there's something that they're doing differently for multitasking and handling all that. But for the average developer, you're going to write a UI split view controller. You run it on an iPhone in portrait mode. It's going to be the standard list to detail style that we're used to. The iPad will have it on, split view. And it's that iPad world where you have a list on the left, the detail view on the right, that translates more to Mac OS. Mm-hmm. You see it with the Notes app, where you have your list of notes on the left, your note on the right. Mm-hmm. Apple Mail, they're all very, very similar and use those design patterns throughout.
I begin to wonder how many of the Mac apps are currently Catalyst apps under the hood.
Yeah, I don't want to sound dumb here, but I know that the News app and the Stocks app, those are for sure, and the Swift Playgrounds app
And I think
is a Catalyst build.
The TV app as well.
Yes.
I'm
sure there's more.
Yeah. But it's going to be things like you're going to discover that Mail or Safari or the mainstays of what's been on the Mac for a long time.
Yeah, and when they were previewing in last WWDC Safari on iPadOS, it just started to feel more like a desktop browser. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that's just part of that transition that Apple's trying to do.
We're talking about, the UI kit is there. Does Swift UI work as well?
Yeah, so it seems to be Swift UI is just, if you write a Swift UI app, you're going to write a Swift UI app that works for both. It's a little bit different of a world that you work with. I would say that you probably want to be familiar with Catalyst if you're writing a Swift UI app, so that you can understand how maybe you take advantage of the menu bars, or how do you work those deeper connections into connecting to the dock icon, or some other of the OS level things that aren't available right out of the gate with Catalyst.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those things that a Mac app we're used to. And just because my iPad app is now lit up on a Mac doesn't necessarily mean we're fully there yet, because we've got menu, mouse, dock. How do these things work with Catalyst?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's some things that just aren't there yet, and I would suspect that we'd see this year a big jump. But one of them, being able to just go in and edit, you'll see people change the dock icon for certain scenarios. Mm-hmm. You have your menu bar applications that live up in the upper right-hand corner of your menu bar. Those things just aren't, plug and play right out of the box. You have to use a bundle and have your code live somewhere else and tie into that in order to be able to do it. But for the average iOS developer, you can start to implement things like your menu bar system, where you have file, edit, those options, and it doesn't take a lot to actually get to that point.
Are you basically tying in by some form of deep linking to your app?
Yeah, so that's probably the easiest way to put it is you have just a delegate that can respond to menu commands.
Okay.
And then you figure out where you want to go from there with that. So it's not too different from if you were a Mac OS developer making menu bar commands. You're just probably going to put it in a different file, maybe organize your code slightly differently than you're used to. But overall, very easy to pick up and do.
Now, I look at the book sometimes when I ask some of these questions, so I have to ask, does drag and drop present a special problem, or is it?
If you implement drag and drop the way that Apple has you do it, you should be fine. It's one thing, though, that most iOS developers don't consider, I think. There's a lot of those types of features missing in a lot of iOS apps. But for a Mac OS user, this is something that you expect to just work. That you can drop a file, an image, move text around. And so it will maybe take an iOS developer a little bit more time to build that in when they weren't used to having to think about that.
Is it really just things like the menu and the mouse to make it feel like a Mac app, or is there sort of a platform nuancing that you find you need?
Well, one of the things that we did stumble upon very early was the split view. And there's a way that you can, if you just build your app with a split view controller, it's going to look a little odd in Mac OS. So you can just use some very simple preferences on the split view controller if it's running in Catalyst to say, use this different style to get what would really look correct on the platform. The other thing would be the cursor support, which we're getting a little more used to with Apple's new keyboard and touchpad peripherals that are coming out for the iPad. We're not used to having to develop cursor support. And even on iPad OS, your cursor is either a little circle or it's going to be something that highlights buttons in a way that we're actually, I've never really seen work that way. But on Mac OS, you do have to consider do you make a button highlight? Do you change something about the element that you're hovering over? And those features and tools are all built in to make that actually quite simple. We found we wanted to write a very large chapter on this, and then it was just, turn on a couple of things and you've got it.
So what kind of app? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
That's really interesting. So Hover is like a really interesting example of a thing that makes kind of no sense on an iOS app, right? Like, what does hover means? I'm not touching the screen. Whereas it makes a ton of sense on a desktop app. What I'm interested in, like, if you had some feature where you displayed something on hover, would that code, would you have to use macros to figure out if you're on iOS or Mac OS, or is there a nice way to just be like, yeah, if I'm on a place that doesn't support hover, do nothing, otherwise do?
You just have to add a hover gesture recognizer. That's it.
And it just works on, like, does it just do nothing on iOS?
It won't do anything. If you have iOS, you don't have to worry about having that code not compile there. You don't have to wrap any special macros. Just add the hover gesture.
Just works.
If you have an iPad app and someone has the cursor turned on, it will do what you've asked it to do.
Oh,
and then on
goodness.
On Mac OS, you can have the tooltips. You can have the different, whatever you need to have happen there.
You can use the Bluetooth trackpad now with the iPad, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, in iOS 13, you could use like a third-party mouse, Bluetooth mouse, and that's how I wrote that chapter. But now the trackpad support, I believe, is there. I haven't had a chance to try it out myself, but there are limitations that were there when we wrote the book. Being able to change the cursor style to maybe the hand or the insert symbol that we're used to seeing. More of those features are coming. There was some stuff that I saw that came through with the latest update to iPad OS and Catalyst to support more of those features.
So I take it you jumped on this thing shortly after Catalyst was finally formally announced.
Yeah, so we started writing the book, I think in late July, and we had spent that whole June and July reading everything we could, coming up with the sample apps, and really trying to get ahead of it. We spent all of July and August writing the book.
So between June and September, when the OS released, how much did Catalyst shift, grow, mature, etc.?
At this point, I don't remember much. I don't think there was a whole lot. There was some changes to how the macro worked. There was a lot of bugs. There was a couple betas there, if I remember correctly, that it was just very difficult to get through some of the features we were writing because of how buggy it was. They seemed to get out at the gate there, in the release in September with things were, generally stable. But once September came and people were using it, it kind of turned into a pretty controversial framework and topic in the Twitterverse.
Yeah, the impression I get is that there isn't a lot of gray. There's a lot of black and a lot of white that people.
And that's it.
That people love it or hate it.
Yeah, and maybe I'm partial to it because I wrote the book. I love it, but I can see it for the flaws that it has. I would have to commend Apple for doing something that's pretty crazy. I don't think we expected it to be the way it was. But there's a lot to work. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with it.
Is the anger toward it just the incompleteness or the bugginess of it?
I think that's where a lot of people lie. I think a lot of us, and maybe those of us that are newer to the iOS world, we forget what iOS 3 or 4 was like. And if you were never in that world, you probably don't remember or know the craziness that we would deal with scroll views and table views. And Apple can get a really great thing, started, and maybe we have to wait a few years for it to mature and get to where it needs to be, but they're getting us ready. They're helping us along the way. And that sounds very Apple fanboy, but now that we're here in iOS 13, coming up on 14, I don't remember the struggles every day when I'm using Xcode, except for the problems that Xcode may, crash on you. I imagine 5 years from now, whatever it is Catalyst has evolved into will be something that we all look at as, this is just how you build apps. And it's that easy.
So to restate, because I hadn't heard about the controversy, the main argument is just whether people feel like it's a good idea to use Catalyst to like make macOS apps out of it, or is there some other dimension to it?
I don't know what the initial hate for what I was seeing, if it was people that were macOS developers that just thought, hey, you can't do everything that I'm used to. Yeah. Which, to be fair, their arguments, there's a lot of arguments that were very valid that I saw and I could agree with and get behind and say, yeah, that would be great to have a change to. And then the other side of it was just, this is great. I don't have to do much. But maybe you weren't used to having to make a pretty complicated desktop app.
Yeah.
You're not going to be writing a Photoshop in iOS to begin with. I mean,
right.
You're not going to be writing Xcode for iOS.
Well, I would hope so. I hope one day they do.
Yeah, I know. We all do. We all hope.
I don't know if I hope that. I don't know about that.
But
you're right. Like the way that Photoshop works today, even though the iPad app is very good, there's just, I'm sure a lot of things that developers can just harness and utilize in macOS right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'd also imagine, I know that personally there are times where, a product manager or something has said, hey, let's just, slap a web view in this app and then we're good to go. And I've been like, no, you won't get the real experience. They won't have all this feedback. It'll be super laggy, yada, 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 all that stuff. I could see a world where macOS, people who are mainly macOS developers might have a similar sense of like, no. There's all this stuff you need to think about when you're making a desktop app. And I could see that fueling some frustration.
Absolutely. I think it's a tool that developers have at their disposal. Not every tool is the right thing to use every single time. If you were to talk to my manager at work, she would tell you she thinks I hate things like React Native or Flutter, and that's not the case. It's more just we picked a certain tool for the job we were doing, and we don't want to try and blend or change. And I think it's silly to ignore those technologies, ignore something like Catalyst or just completely ignore iOS. But to be familiar with it and know what you're talking about when it comes to the scenario, then you can make the right and informed decision for sure.
So the journaling app was basically just a way to take notes and have the history of those notes?
Yeah, so we wanted to expose the user to as many of the iPad OS and Mac OS things as we could all up front in one app. Mm-hmm. We had the split view controller. We had a text field, text box that you could type in, and we had a photo picker and drop zone for dropping photos in, as well as menu commands, a toolbar, everything all wrapped into one that was really what we felt brought a user into a true Mac OS app world.
Now, this almost is going to sound silly. Can you use the touchpad on your Mac with this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's
it just seems like it's overkill. You've walked away from your touch device so that you can go onto your Mac and use the touch part.
Yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to do is show off how straightforward the cursor support was. But the other thing was that we did show you how to build keyboard shortcuts. You can navigate the app using just your keyboard, as a lot of power users may be familiar with on their Mac OS apps. So we wanted to give you that experience. How do you have hovering gestures? How do you have key gestures and tabbing and working through that?
That's very cool.
So we've sort of gone back and forth on this, but let's bite this one on the tail. Would you call Catalyst baked at this point? Is it strong enough to put production into, or does it still have some growth it needs?
I'm surprised at how much people can do with it. I think that it's baked in the sense that you can get your app out there. You can have your code base all in one project. You may have to do some finagling here and there to get it there. But we've seen things like Twitter, Jira, and Swift Playgrounds are using Catalyst. And I don't want to get into the philosophical about whether these companies, you like them or not, but the applications seem to be good and stable. And I have tried them out just because I wanted to see how they worked in interest of this topic. And I don't know what they went through, the pains they went through, but they have it there and it's working.
So this is the part that I've slowly been terming Santa Code Clause. And that is, we are now just about a month or so from WWDC 2020 virtual.
Exciting, yes.
If you could get the ear of Apple engineers, what are you hoping to see in 2020? What do you wish was there that's missing? What's your wish list?
There were things that I was running into, like just minor things that didn't have anything to do with the app, like a color picker. That wasn't there, and that seems silly, but for some developers, that is a big part of their app. Is for a photo editor or something of that nature, you may need something like that. So there's these. I would really just like to see more access to the Mac OS controls and features that may have no place in an iPad OS world, but I would still want to be able to code for without having to jump through a lot of hoops to get those into this app.
You had mentioned the specialty menu on the right side of the menu as well.
It seems like a small thing, but there are many apps that you just want to live up there. As I'm looking at this, I see the Zoom icons there, and it's something that I can access and use, and it's important up there to me, especially in today's age. Maybe I don't want it to live in my dock always, but it's a little thing like that would make my app feel integrated for a user.
You don't have to find an excuse. I have a 27-inch monitor, and my utility menu goes almost all the way to the camera.
Yeah,
wow, that's impressive.
That's great.
I love my little icons.
Yeah, I've written, at a previous job, I've written just a few utilities that only lived up there, and it was sad to think, I couldn't have done that with Catalyst.
Now you live in my world. You were a Mac engineer who made the jump to iOS.
I was a college comp sci Java developer who found an Objective-C book somewhere and just fell in love. It was almost like
with Objective-C.
Yeah, it was this forbidden thing. I wasn't supposed to find it. I wasn't supposed to read it. I started just tinkering around. I petitioned for our school to have an Objective-C iOS class that I finally got. My last semester at college there, and that was very early on, and that was. It was kind of like I was doing both at the same time. I got a job where I was doing hybrid iOS apps, but making native Mac OS app or iOS 10 apps at the time. So that was kind of my world early on in that, early 2010s.
And now you basically are converting iOS apps to run on the Mac.
I would like to find one that's a real one that I've done. It's been all hobby projects at this point.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. Andy, do you feel there's anything else you want to add in that's Catalyst related? Because, we can always throw you more questions if there's a specific topic you want to hit.
No, I was going over my notes, and I think that really covered everything. Like I said,
Catalyst is a lot easier than it seems.
It is. It's a big topic with a few short set of answers, and then if you really need to get deeper, it just becomes either too hard or impossible.
I have a question. So I've used a couple, one utility. Basically, I've used Flutter to get a desktop app out of a mobile app that I've made. And one of the things I immediately discovered was there's some view logic that I do in mobile that makes way less sense on bigger screens, basically. So like one example is maybe I'll have a button that goes all the way across the screen on my iPhone or on my Android device. Looks fine. If you have a button that goes all the way across the screen on your desktop app, it looks ridiculous. Are there like what's the answer for kind of handling that sort of stuff?
That's what, it's pretty easy. The moment you put your app into full screen the first time, you see how ridiculous it looks. If you were making an iPad app, just run it. It looks crazy. And that's where you do have to really either rely on your designers or just your knowledge of design yourself to say, how big is something supposed to be? And you start tweaking and writing maybe some minimal specific constraints or just minor changes for the desktop platform.
I always smile and laugh when somebody says you just rely on your designers, because most of us are hobbyists wanting to turn an app out by ourselves, and we're like, our designers, well, that'd be me with a different hat. and I'm not a designer.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I like to pretend like I'm a good designer, but when it comes down to my hobby apps, I try and actually stick as much to a native UI as possible, just something that follows the HIG as much as it can, because I don't want to have to go back 4 years later and go, I don't know why I made this button, deliberately aqua, and aqua's gone.
Oh God.
Yeah.
It's
all
lickable
aqua all the time.
Yeah.
So Drew, you were talking a bit earlier about some of the differences between being an engineer and being an architect. Could you kind of elaborate on that a bit more?
Meetings.
Just meetings.
Oh, I suppose you want more than that.
So that's a
all right,
topic.
sign off.
It's in my current job, I was brought on as a lead engineer, and you're deep in the code and you're leading other engineers. You're showing them what to do code-wise. All of a sudden, I got pivoted to another group as the architect, and suddenly I'm the one learning the business logic from a technical point of view. I'm the one who has to be able to understand what they're trying to create and how to put this together. Literally, the word architect and everything that you get from the building idea, it really measures out. Now, I've done architecture before, but this is architecture on a grander scale, because I am an architect for now a team of roughly 45 to 50 people. And all the tech people are, I went from like number 65 in a group of 300 to number 3 in a group of about 75, 80. So I am always looking at everything and trying to figure out what's the best way to put this together. What is the best way to understand the data structures and how they're going to interact with the UX. But on top of that, and I'm not kidding, I'm in meetings. I am almost always in meetings, and when I'm not in meetings, I'm doing code reviews and answering harder questions from the lead devs. It's like, I can't do this merge conflict.
Are you finding yourself, are you still actively programming, or is most of it at a higher like descriptive level?
I have been handed one project where we've been given this sort of really technical thing that we have legacy code from, that the legacy code has to stand up and bark at some point. And the legacy code was made by X company a long time ago. So they basically handed it to me and said, well, can you chisel out the stuff we need and can you make it stand up and bark? Which was really nice. And the reason it was really nice is because they said, we want you to see what you can do with that in the next 8 to 10 hours. We'll give you off on Friday from all of your meetings.
There you go. Yeah. The meeting free. I like that little carrot.
I was meeting free. I actually got a nap in the afternoon. It was wonderful. But it's an interesting process because I'm not learning the minutia of the languages anymore, and I can understand how one would then progress from an engineer into an architect into either a VP engineering or a PM of engineering or something like that, because your skills on the front lines become a little more rusty. You need to be able to look at something and go, okay, here's the potential problem that you're seeing. But in truth, a lot of your answers suddenly start becoming JFGI, which of course stands
JFGI? Oh, all right, yeah.
which stands for just find it in Google.
I love it. That
like
sums
that,
up my entire programming career.
Or of course Stack Overflow. But from an architectural point of view, you don't necessarily have all the answers, but you know who to talk to get answers. You know how to ask the correct questions to get those kind of things put together.
That's interesting. So it's a lot of like knowing all the different strings to tug on to get to the final picture, rather than working on whatever that string is attached to at that point.
Right. Yeah. It's having the technical chops experience to say, no, it's okay to break this. It's okay to change that call, to watch how the compiler breaks things, because that'll tell you how it works. But at the same time, it's not my job to solve it anymore. And that's a very strange feeling, because having been on the front lines in the trenches, etc., for so long, somebody hands me something like this. This storyboard has a Git conflict. It's like, well, I know what to do here. You need to. And it's like, no. I give them the base idea of what they need to do because they need to learn it.
What do you do in that scenario? I usually just give up.
Oh, okay. So this is good for the after show. Is how does one Git conflict a storyboard?
This is a great topic. Yes.
Yeah. Let's save that one for the after show. That'll tempt people to come and listen to come and see the YouTube section, because that's a long process. Resolve early, resolve often. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so do you, I imagine that role actually being very stressful. Like, it sounds very stressful for me not to be able to, like, when a problem comes up, not to be able to solve the problem, or not even not being able to solve the problem, but needing to exist with the problem still there. That makes sense.
I think the important thing to realize is that I've got problems that I have to solve. Because I've got people higher on the food chain than me asking more complex questions, like, how are you going to make this work? And I realize that the individual engineers who have their hands in their specific area of the code, they're not equipped to see the big picture.
Sure.
And this used to get me in trouble when I was a younger engineer, is that I could always look at big picture. And I wasn't supposed to. So having a better look at the big picture, okay, so here are your RESTful API calls, and here are your data structures, and here's what your UX is going to be like. Now, how are you going to do this asynchronously? And you've got so many different gears working together there that you have to be able to say, okay, this side of the team, you're going to work on this. And when those other questions come up that normally need to be solved, that you used to solve, I don't want to make it sound like it's beneath you, but there are other people. But
that's not your job right now.
It's not your job.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting learning experience when you make that transition.
Yeah, that does sound empowering when you get to that point where you're like, this is not my job. I am focusing on this, so delegate or whatever.
And I feel good because I finally actually feel like I'm using my undergraduate studies, which was in theater, for directing.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That feels very applicable.
Because directing in theater is the big picture and seeing how everything fits together on stage. And you're constantly telling your actors, you don't know about this. You only know your individual world. So that's how that all puts together, and that's how all that all sticks together.
Sounds exciting.
Exciting, daunting, terrifying, and of course, meetings.
The endless stream of meetings.
Oh my heavens. I had a 3:00 meeting today that got out at 3:15, and I was like, yay!
The joy of an early ending of a meeting.
It was just like, and they always say the same thing. They always say, well, we'll give you that time back. It's like, no, it's not like I had time to begin with. So I think that's going to wrap things up for this episode. I really want to thank Andy for his time and joining us on the show. Thank you, Andy, for all the information on Catalyst. I know it seems like there's not a lot, but it is a wonderful growing technology, and it's got an interesting future in the Apple ecosystem. Thanks again for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much. I had a great time with doing this today.
If you want, you can find Andy, Alex, or I on Twitter, maybe. I am Podcast Dru. That's DRU. Alex is Alex Sullivan 444, and Andy is Mac Andy P, or possibly Mac and YP.
We'll never know.
I'm not quite sure which. If you really want to find Andy, get the book Catalyst by Tutorials. It is a fantastic book, and you'll find that it's not that hard to get yourself started unless you're doing something weird.
Exactly.
Our next episode coming up in about 2 weeks is Brian Kafitz with the long-awaited by Alex Flutter episode.
Ooh, so exciting.
And then our next iOS episode, 2 weeks after that, will be Brian Schick talking about Fastlane.
Also so excited.
Which is a really great, it's not just iOS, it's a really great scripting system for your continuous integrations. Of course, for those of you listening to the podcast, we invite you to look for this episode a few weeks from now on YouTube. The video episode contains some information that we dropped on the cutting room floor, not necessarily our mistakes, but some of the material that we just didn't get around to talking about. And there'll be a little more casual after show with our guests as soon as we finish up with the podcast. So we hope you'll check it out. In the meantime, for Alex and myself, for the audio podcast version of the show, we're going to head back to the Emerald Castle. Ray, back to you.
I'm so interested in hearing how you actually do merge conflict in storyboards.
Oh, yeah, this is something I do all the time, and I've come to actually not dread it.
Oh my God, dread it. Oh man, I'm so excited.
Well,
I'm
first of all, so the typical merge conflict in a storyboard is because two people are trying to do things at the same time with the storyboard. And in general, you really want to make sure that you're doing conflict resolution as often as possible.
Sure.
Because with storyboards, you're dealing with a proprietary XML file to begin with. But I find that the one thing you basically do is you figure out what you've changed. You go find the thing that's actually conflicting with you. You undo your change, bring in their version.
And just play it back.
And then play back your change. Now, this is also why when you're doing storyboard changes, check in early, check in often, check in small.
That's I think the biggest thing that we found on our team. We have about 40 developers, all could potentially be working in a file, and we've had to try out rebasing strategies, fast forwarding with Git, and it really is. You almost have to have a flight plan that says, okay, only these people can work in it on this time, and that's about it.
See, the way that I'm working out my current project is everything is basically a framework. So everything is, for the most part, self-contained. And if I have somebody working on a UX segment, they're working on their UX segment for their feature, and that's it. And they'll work in it in zibs, not storyboards.
Interesting.
Just keep it small and concise. Work in your own little area.
That makes
and
sense.
then I have an app to wrap the entire thing.
So you get to coordinate a lot easier. There's lots of little individual parts. That makes sense.
Yeah, we've kind of taken a similar approach. Now that you can have storyboard references, our storyboards are pretty tiny. we try and, cap it at maybe 2 or 3 screens, and then use a Zib whenever possible with cells or just one-off screens that don't deserve to live in a storyboard.
That was one of my that is one issue I've had throughout my tenure doing iOS development. So most of my development is Android development, but occasionally I'll hop back into the iOS world. And it always feels like, whether it's storyboards or the Xcode project file or 2 people working in a nib, there's a lot of like really challenging Git spots that pop up. Mm-hmm. And it was like when storyboards first came out, I know the company I was working at ended up having one storyboard that had like
that was before
15 or 20 screens in it, and it just became
logical thing.
Back before storyboard abstraction.
Like you couldn't even open the file, and if you had a merge conflict, it just became like, I guess I'll do my part over again. Like, I'm not going to try to actually fix
that was during the days of you had a bullhorn to say, I'm going to go edit the storyboard now. And everybody basically froze what they were doing because they knew that everybody would have to pick up that change. But storyboard abstractions really made that a lot easier. And working predominantly, the smaller you can work, the better. Yeah. And I have always been a proponent of, I want my Git changes, my Git commits to be surgical.
Yeah.
Because I have more than once dealt with an engineer who has done a check-in of 65 files and the commit messages change stuff.
Yes. It also makes PRs infinitely easier if you keep things tight.
Yes.
If you have like nice, tight, small pull requests. Because if I get a pull request with 4,000 lines of changes in it, the reality is the best I can do is like go through and point out syntax issues or really minor things. It ends up being, a day-long task if you really want to.
By that point, the only thing you're making notes on is, why can't you just put that in a constants file?
Yeah, exactly. It's that level of feedback, which is like way less impactful than a more, a higher level, thoughtful feedback on the approach and all that jazz.
Andy, you have the same look in your eyes that I have right now in the back of my mind going, what can I say that won't get me in trouble?
Oh, well, yeah, it's such a scary thing to say in public, how you feel about storyboards and merge conflicts. Be judged forever.
What world we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I found very, very helpful for me was to actually understand what the XML meant. Because it actually is pretty logical. It's very verbose, and there's a lot to get through. One of the things that helped me was just doing Android development and doing that XML UI development there, and understanding how outlets, constraints, and the UI elements themselves are actually, how their syntax is broken up in that storyboard file. And yes, it's tedious. It's very time consuming. No one wants to have to deal with it. But once you figure out, here's how I reference this ID to this constraint, generally what the syntax is supposed to be, it can become pretty less mind numbing when you have to encounter it.
And anyway, you've got PBX projects as well to have conflicts over anyway.
It's the XML has also gotten saner over the years, right? Or maybe saner's not the right word, but like it went from being just machine readable to being rocket.
If you ever went through the conversion from nib to zib, and then interface builder being a separate app, and now it all being in one, and the XML gets smaller and smaller, it is getting easier. But
yeah, and I go back to the XML days of RSS. So I had a good understanding of XML, and that was back during the time where you basically did your own XML parsers, and you had to do it tag by tag in iterative and recursive loops. So once you've gone through that mess on your own, the storyboards aren't quite as daunting.
Exactly.
Also, on top of that, your merge conflicts, if you've been following those rules of the small changes, the surgical changes, and being able to roll back the changes you make, those merge conflicts on zibs or on storyboards are not as bad.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's probably much clearer. Like I added a button and a view to this screen. Oh, this person also added a button, and that's the merge conflict.
Yeah,
and you can kind of just dedupe. Yeah,
and don't fall into the trap of thinking you're going to organize the storyboard and clean up the alignments of things. if two views aren't perfectly aligned, just leave it be. It'll be fine.
Well, I mean, we still have the problem of if I open a storyboard, Xcode breathes all over it.
Yeah.
Yes, all of the little floating point math that it wants to put in for you.
You know, all of your all of your 0.9999994s now have become 1.0003s.
It's precise though, so you have to give them credit there.
I just wish the precision was the same from iteration to iteration.
Just don't open it up on a different screen size. That'll save you.
Oh my God! Yeah, it does get to the point where it's like I'll open a storyboard or a zib to look at it, and then I'll go to another file just so I can discard the changes that I've just done.
Very important. Very important.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's such a wonderful surprise when you're going to, like commit the changes that you've made and you're like, wait a minute, I haven't been anywhere near this. And then you realize, I had it open in another tab. That my fault.
I just looked at it. And,
I looked at it. Oh, I searched its name.
I have a check-in comment that I make from time to time that it's like Xcode breathed on my zib.
I like that a lot. I like breathed on it.
All right, so let's see what else, because this is the after show. We can be informal. We don't even have to talk code at this point.
Ooh.
So tell me about the guitars. Do they have names, first of all?
No, I tried to do that when I was younger, and I just kept running out. I've gone through about 12 different guitars throughout my life. I still have my first two when I was, younger and had to sell a few. So it just gets too difficult. Now it's get the right guitar and not have my wife, argue me on how many I want. Just get the one and then be done.
So what do you have now?
So I've got a new Gibson. It's the new standard. It's the 2019. It's modeled after the 1950s. I've got a Taylor 114 here, and I've got an Ibanez AE18. I've got a Strat in the back. That's one that's just custom that I built.
Nice.
Oh, that's cool.
Got a Gibson SJ100 downstairs. Got a couple more scattered through the house.
So is that it? Is it the guitars and the travel and that's it?
I'm a little ashamed to admit it. It's watches as well. That's
watches.
Yeah, that's the tough one. That's the pricier than the guitars. So it's few and far between for love there.
What are you wearing today?
I have an Omega Speedmaster. It's the first Omega in space.
Do you have an Apple Watch?
I have one that's the pre-series one. The first model, and it sits on a shelf.
You didn't pay for the gold one, did you?
No. It was actually our CIO's at the time, and he was like, "Oh, I want a different one," so he just gave it to me, and we all, our office shut down, and they just let me keep it.
My Series Zero finally died about a year ago. I was actually probably about a year and a half ago. I was out in Canada at a hotel with a pool, and the pool's chlorine was really high. And I'd been actually swimming with the Series Zero. I hadn't had any problems with it, but the chlorine content in that pool sort of caused it to unglue. But that was
a shame. That's a shame.
That's a bad death for some tech.
Yeah, but I wanted like a short or exploded.
Yeah.
Just unglued.
But at the same time, it was really cool because I got to open the thing up and take a look inside.
That is actually pretty cool. Yeah.
So, could you actually discern individual components, or was it just
I don't have to do that. That's what MacFixit.com is for.
They didn't find like the coronavirus testing kit that's built into them, or
Everyone knows.
It's there.
That's a Series 6. That's what's coming out in June.
Everyone. Yeah.
That's what's coming out at WWDC.
Little needle pops out.
Oh God! You press the button and ow.
Maybe better than the swab. Yeah.
Anything is better than the swab, from what I've been hearing.
Yeah, it sounds rough.
Have you been tested?
I haven't. No, I've had the flu test, which is a swab in the nose, but
not like the swab for coronavirus, which tries to dig out your brain.
They need to tickle your frontal lobe or something. I don't know. It's something weird.
I keep hearing that these people who've been tested, it's like they held the back of my head like they were going to give me a kiss, and then they shoved this thing up and tried to hook my brain out.
No.
Yeah. Nah. I'll pass. Can you just get tests now, or do you have to be sick?
You still have to have. Well, it depends on your state, because I think Los Angeles is now offering it to anybody who asks.
I think California's doing a lot more. They've got that 25,000 a day they can do.
Yeah, because California's trying to stay. California's trying not to be the next New York.
Yeah, they seem to be succeeding.
They've been doing a decent job at it.
Yeah.
But at least for me in Pennsylvania, you still have to be symptomatic and have a doctor's appointment, basically saying the doctor said yes, go.
Yeah. They've
honestly,
started
at the point that I'm showing those kind of symptoms and there's that risk, I'm like, okay, go ahead, play with my brain.
Yeah.
Because it's either that or potentially die.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some drive-up test locations here. My sister, she had like a cough for 4 days, had to go do it, but she was able to just drive up and do it.
We didn't even ask, are you weathering COVID okay inside the house?
Mentally or physically?
All of them above.
So we live in a pretty unique community here in Atlanta. It's actually a city called Peachtree City. It's a golf cart community. It is. It actually really is. It's there's about 100 miles of paved golf cart path.
Oh, wow. That's actually very cool.
You could walk, ride your bike, take the golf cart out. And so people are pretty good about social distancing on it. There's a path just right outside of our neighborhood that we could get on. My wife and I have been taking early morning walks just to get, outside fresh air. And we have a friend that lent us a golf cart, so we will do that at night when no one else is out, and it keeps us a little sane. But we haven't had any, aside from the allergies, to scare us every couple of days if it's the virus or not. Now things have been good. Kroger will deliver groceries, and they've been really good for us. Don't know if we can plug Kroger on this, but they've been awesome for us.
We're fairly loose with some of the things we promote on this show.
Yeah.
We actually, on that note, have y'all noticed any grocery shortages in your areas?
Yes.
Yeah.
I notice every time we put an order in, I won't get about 5 or 6 items because they were out of stock. We have had to venture out a couple of times, and like the meat department's empty.
Yeah. We've been still going to get groceries. I live in Boston.
Which makes it rather interesting that you used y'all.
I love the word y'all.
It's a perfect word.
Dude, it really is. It's gender neutral. It's like, it's such a good word.
I'm from California.
Say y'all all the time.
I adopted it very quickly here.
Don't look at me. I'm living in Pittsburgh where it's supposed to be yins.
I feel like it's the spirit. It's the spirit. It makes sense to me. Yeah.
God, I love y'all. But so we've still been going out to get groceries, and we have 2 grocery stores that are basically equidistant from us, a Stop and Shop and a Star Market. And garlic has been totally unavailable.
Oh,
the last couple of times we've gone. Yeah, and it's actually been a very interesting look into like supply lines and things along those lines.
Are you talking powdered minced, or are you talking?
No, I mean like whole cloves of garlic. There'll be a full rack of onions, then an empty space, and a full rack of potatoes, which is no garlic, and flour flour is gold at this
Well,
point.
right
There's
now,
just no flour in Boston.
everybody seems to be getting onto a baking kick now.
Which is why I want flour.
Yeah. Yeah, we bought a 12-pound bag from Sam's Club and still got some of it left. Yeah. We've been making pretzels or challah bread.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Even I'm guilty of that. Today I made churros.
Ooh. That's awesome. See, we're all discovering this wonderful
I've never
thing.
baked before.
That's wonderful.
I've never cooked before. I got a piping bag. I got cinnamon, sugar,
that's awesome.
The oil, the flour, and I had no idea what I was doing. I even asked my wife, "She's like, are you going to help me out?" She's like, "No, you're on your own." and they came out.
Was it the Disney churro recipe?
It was the Disney.
Okay.
It was the Disney churro bites.
I've been trying to make the Disney grilled cheese, but finding some of the stuff is a little hard right now. Yeah.
But it was the Disney churro bites. And we'll, of course, obviously have to put that into the show notes.
That'll be this weekend's food for us. Yeah.
But I think the biggest problem I had was keeping the oil at the right temperature because I have a gas stove.
Do you have a temperature gauge that you can put in there?
The only one I have is a meat thermometer, and that one basically after about 200 degrees pops. So
your meat is done.
It's over 200.
Your meat is charred.
You got it. Your meat is charred. Yeah, I made sugar cookies the other day for the first time, and it was also a wonderful experience.
I'm getting so hungry.
Yeah, right?
That's the whole See, we do the first hour is programming, and then the second half hour is culinary.
I like it, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I've been furloughed from work for the last month and a half, and so that means I make every dinner. My wife works from home, and so she'll usually make dinner while I'm on my way home, but now I've been doing it. And so I've had to figure out that I can actually cook, and it's been good.
It's fun, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Have you come across those companies that you actually can select your dishes, and they'll bring you a box with all your ingredients? And
we've tried it, and I liked some of them, and I didn't like the other ones. So it was a real hit or miss. I think it was freshly and. The quality of the food was good. I don't have any complaints about the company. It's just some of the menu items we didn't like. That was all.
We gave it a shot, and we really got hit by the amount of packaging. I don't know why, but that really was like we have a very small apartment that a quarter of it was dedicated to one, Blue Apron meal or whatever. And the meals were like
the big bag.
You did Blue Apron?
We tried Blue Apron. Yeah.
You get the box with the 2 gigantic ice bricks.
Yeah, exactly. And you go through if you do it 2 or 3 times, you have a warehouse.
Yeah, pretty much. We're doing 3 meals a week, and we have boxes with those strange faux bubble wrap bags in them. But I love the food.
It's good stuff, and it's very nice too to have. Have you ever gone to a burrito bar and been like, I would make so many burritos if only all the ingredients were prepared and laid out for me. And it's really nice to have that with Blue Apron.
See, now you're reminding me of going camping and actually doing an omelet bar for friends when we were camping.
You're a good friend to have when camping.
Omelet bar.
None of my friends make omelet bars when we camp.
I did it once. I did it once. I didn't actually do some of the omelets right, but they came out nicely, and it was like, maybe if I ever go camping again, because it's been years since I've gone camping.
That sounds wonderful.
Well, we're big campers. We've been missing the past few, camping trips that we were supposed to be doing here in Georgia. So that's a little, another thing that keeping us a little cabin fevery here.
So let's see. Not sure if I got it. It was just like the entire conversation dropped. What kind of is it? Day camping or?
We have. Well, I don't have one. My father-in-law has a fifth wheel that he's had for, I think 20 something years. My wife was a young kid when they got it, and they go up to a lake up in the north of Georgia. Have an old boat that we go tubing on, jet skiing, and just a lot of fun. The only way to do camping in Georgia is with an air conditioner.
I buy that.
I don't think I could do a tent. I was a Boy Scout here. It was miserable. Just did not like camping here until I had an AC.
So how is that in like an RV or something like that? Or?
Yeah, so just like we call it a fifth wheel. It's just the trailer RV with your truck.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not like the awesome $300,000 thing, but it's a very nice. It's I don't want my father-in-law to think I'm dissing it. It's a comfortable cabin.
See, I would love to do the getting a large trailer. A large, not that used to be the Winnebagos, but a really large one, and just travel for a year.
My brother lives full time in an RV. He's also a programmer. He lives in California, and he made the decision to, go full time in an RV, and he loves it.
Yeah, these are YouTube videos that take me down a black hole. Is these guys that have van life? It's It's appealing.
I watched some of those videos of the what technologies are in RVs now, and it's just like that's insane. That's like a starship.
Yeah, he has all these solar hookups, all of this stuff. The biggest issue I've seen is internet. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, does he have to go to a gym for showering, or
no? He actually I don't know exactly about showering, but I have a feeling that he has a hookup within his RV because it's like a big old RV. He's got more space than me.
Oh, he probably has the shower built into the RV.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the van life guys. That's what worries me is.
Vans seem a bit tougher. I don't know if I could do a van. I have another buddy who did that for a while, but
even in California, I don't know if I could do it. It's tough, yeah.
So how is your brother dealing with COVID then? If
I think better than most because he's not trapped in one spot, so he can still drive somewhere else. So he spends most of his time he spends around the Santa Cruz area.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm from.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, I grew up in San Jose. We'd go to Santa Cruz, the beach boardwalk all the time. Yeah, I love it. Nice. That's the place. If you're going to do it there.
Yeah, absolutely. He lived in San Francisco for a year or two, and that didn't quite jive with him. Then he went off to Santa Cruz, and he loves Santa Cruz. So, but he, I think we were talking to him last week, and he had taken the RV up to somewhere a bit north of Berkeley, just to go somewhere else for a while. And that is nice because I can't take my home somewhere else for a while. Very much trapped here. Yeah, I think it's been going well for him.
Oh, we can hope that everybody can travel more soonish without it killing anybody.
Yeah. It's hurting us here in Atlanta.
It's hurting us everywhere.
Yeah.
Andy, again, on our post show, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your time. We really appreciate having you on.
Well, I really appreciate it. This was a treat. I've never done it before, so it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much, guys.
It was a ton of fun.
Again, for those of you watching on YouTube, which you have to be for this part of the show, we will have another post-show extension on our Flutter episode coming up in a few weeks. Just keep watching the Ray Wenderlich channel here on YouTube. Other than that, I send it back to the Emerald Castle again for real this time. Ray, back to you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a rating on iTunes. See you next time.